Alright, so let me just set the stage here. What if I were to tell you that there is this game out there where you play as the US president? That doesn't sound too crazy. There's a couple of games out there where you can play as the president, but he's in a mech suit and he's fighting against the US military, who are being controlled by the vice president, who's also in a mech suit. That just sounds pretty crazy. No major game studio would make a game that insane. Now, what if I were to tell you that FromSoftware made a game like that almost 20 years ago? Yeah, the Dark Souls guys.
Yes, this is real, and yeah, it's about as crazy as it sounds.
Okay, let's party! Welcome to the White House.
Originally released in December of 2004 exclusively for the Xbox for Japan, Metal Wolf Chaos is, by all accounts, insanity when it comes to explaining what the hell this game is about. But at its core, this is a mech game that was made for the American market in mind, making this one of the most patriotic American games ever made that wasn't made by Americans. Ironically though, this game never came out in the West initially. We had to wait 15 years for that.
We have a lot to talk about when it comes to this game's crazy story and how it plays, but I first want to talk about the developer first, and how we eventually got this cult classic in the West. So first, I need to talk about FromSoftware. Fuck, where do I begin?
Well, before they were known for making me question my own sanity when I was continuously getting my ass kicked in games like Bloodborne and Elden Ring, and of course making the entire Souls series, FromSoftware initially started out as a business software developer in 1986, making spreadsheet software, I would assume. I couldn't find anything they made around this time. But in 1994, they made their first game for the brand new Sony PlayStation, and that game was Kingsfield. A 3D action RPG made almost 30 years ago. Yes, this looks very primitive by today's standards, but From really knew what they were doing with their first game and soldiered on to make more sequels for the Kingsfield series, before making another series of games that would define what they were known for. Well, before the Souls series, of course. And that game is Armored Core, a mech game that became very popular in Japan. But even though we got most of them released in the West, they weren't necessarily the most talked about games, even with games like Armored Core 2 being one of the launch titles for the PS2, alongside two other games that FromSoftware made. Yeah, FromSoftware made a fuckload of games back in the late 90s and early 2000s, from the horror adventure series Echo Knight to weird games like The Adventures of Cookie and Cream. But it was thanks to a major tech company that we got the game that we're looking at today. And that, of course, is Microsoft. You see, the Xbox has consistently not sold well in Japan, even to this day, with Sony and Nintendo having a stranglehold on the gaming market there. So Microsoft commissioned a bunch of Japanese developers to make some exclusives for their first console to appeal to the Japanese market. It didn't work out. But FromSoft was one of those developers they reached out to, and they made 5 exclusive games for the original Xbox, with 3 of them being released in the States. Murakumo, Renegade Mech Pursuit, a mech game where you're flying across cities and attacking other mechs. Outside of the graphics, this one doesn't look too interesting to me. Otogi Myth of Demons and Otogi 2, both being action games that look like they were inspired by the Devil May Cry series, just put into feudal Japan with some mysticism, I would assume. Thousand Land, a Japanese release where it looks like it's a strategy game of some sort. I don't know Japanese, so this is only going to get me so far. And of course, there's Metal Wolf Chaos.
Nothing is pointless! And the reason is because I'm the president of the great United States of America! Yeah!
One of the reasons why Metal Wolf's American theming came to be was since Microsoft was commissioning them to make a game, and since they're, an American company, they wanted to make the most fantastically American game possible. Almost to its detriment. There's a handful of reasons why this game never came out in the West initially. With it being a late Xbox release right before the 360 came out, the fact that this game did not sell well in Japan, and according to this Destructoid article by Jordan DeVore, where he interviewed Masaori Takaguchi, one of the game's producers, It was the War on Terror, the September 11th attacks, and the current political climate the US had at the time kinda ruined this game from ever coming out in the West.
I wasn't prepared to talk about fucking 9/11 today, so let's move on.
So this game kinda languished in cult status online, slowly growing an audience given the game's ridiculous premise and its amazing voice acting. A whole bunch of Let's Plays and videos were made about this game, and the price of an original copy, thanks to these videos, skyrocketed at one point. Which brings us to our next studio for today, Devolver Digital. A studio known for publishing many strange and wonderful games. Devolver, alongside General Arcade, made a remaster of this game called Metal Wolf Chaos XD, which brings this onto modern consoles with widescreen support, some small updates to the graphics, translates all the text to English, and has online leaderboards. Thankfully, the remaster keeps the game's iconic English dub, which made the game as cheesy as it was. This will be the version I'm playing today, since, well, an original copy still goes for about $100, so let's boot up the PS5 and play this one. Our story begins with a giant wall of text, unfortunately, but it does catch us up to what's going on. So there's been a coup d'etat against the American government, led by the Vice President, Richard Hawk, aka Dick Hawk, pinning the American military against its citizens, which later in the game, the Vice President explains that he wants to make the entire country full of people who are the best at survival, or some shit like that. He doesn't really elaborate on this, outside of wanting to take the weaklings out. So I'm fucked. With his overrule, it bars any sense of freedom for the citizens of the United States. So it's up to one man in a mech suit to stop the coup d'etat forces and the Vice President. And that man is the 47th President of the United States, Michael Wilson. Wilson 2024, everyone. Anyways, Wilson, in his mech suit, alongside his secretary Jodie Crawford, who talks to him over the radio throughout the game, goes to a bunch of major cities throughout the country, destroying all the coup d'etat forces, giant robot bosses, cannons, and other weird shit that just happens throughout the game. In between each level, you talk to Jodie, hearing the aftermath of what the president did, and their dialogue is just wonderful.
Jody, how's my schedule look for today?
You've got a conference and dinner party at the Japanese embassy regarding wildlife protection.
Oh yeah. Sorry, but I'll have to cancel that. I'm heading out to save America.
And eventually we talk to this resistance guy who we never really know who it is, but it doesn't really matter that much since they only show up in one level. Throughout the game, the president is being tailed by a journalist who's blaming all the problems that's going on in the country on him. That sounded too real. Anyways, he's capturing all of the destruction that's happening as we hear his catchphrase.
Because yes, the pen is still mightier than the sword.
Although he doesn't know that it's the president underneath the mech suit, so he just calls him Metal Wolf. Eventually, this journalist starts to open up to Metal Wolf, saying that he's obviously the good guy here, but I don't think the president is pleased either way.
Whatever.
We also see cutscenes showing direct news feed from this universe. Instead of CNN, this game has DNN. I guess the D stands for this guy. In these cutscenes, we get a better understanding of what's going on in this universe. At first, blaming Metal Wolf for everything, but when Metal Wolf starts to succeed and plans to take the country back with the public starting to back him, the news puts out an ultimatum saying if there's any known supporters of Metal Wolf, will be publicly executed. Hearing that for the first time, with the news anchor saying in his plain, news anchory voice, got me laughing for about 10 minutes straight. After saving Jodie and the resistance fighters, taking over all of the towns, and then getting the White House back, which was just decked out with all kinds of firepower, we then fight the Vice President in Las Vegas. Then we move to fucking space. Of course there has to be a space level here. We kill the Vice President after trying to save him in this cheesy scene that had to be inspired by so many action movies. And then the game ends with America being back in order, with President Wilson giving a heartfelt speech about freedom or something like that.
This game's story was fucking goofy and was a giant callback to a bunch of 80s action movies. If you're going to make a game about the president who's in a mech suit destroying cities and stuff like that, you might as well make it as fun as possible. And that's what this game's story was.
Once again, I should really mention the voice acting throughout the story. Even though this game came out in Japan, this game got a full English dub, which leads to a lot of interesting lines.
The gentleman in me goes off the clock at 5 p.m.
If you followed this channel long enough, then you know I kind of have a soft spot for bad voice acting, and this game is no exception.
Cruel oppression of U.S. citizens still continues all over the nation.
I guess neither of us will see any time off soon.
Michael Wilson shifts from being a badass to being a goddamn goofball.
Hey, Mr. Journalist, take a good long look. I think it's time for a new pen.
He answers every question with,
I'm the President of the United States.
take a shot every time he does that, you'll be on the fucking ground. Jodie keeps the same tone no matter what she's saying, which leads to some ridiculous shit.
Jodie, nor someone as lovely as you.
Sure, whatever. Nice work, Mr. President.
And then there's Richard Hawk.
Richard!
You just don't get it, do you? Freedom is dead. You and your men and this symbol of freedom will all perish.
This guy pretty much steals any scene that he's in with his performance. I had to look up who voices these characters, with the guy who voices the president still doing voice acting to this day. But all three of these voice actors have been in similar games before. They voiced a few characters in the game Baton Kaitos. I've never heard of this game before until now, so moving on. And they also worked on the English dub for
Itoi-san, how do you know about the three blades?
Years ago, I was Chinese.
Yeah, Shenmue's English dub wasn't that good, guys. Their performance, alongside the other voice actors in this game, makes this game's story even cheesier.
Richard!
Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. But that's the story out of the way. What about the gameplay? Well, after jumping out of the White House in the first level and looking at the screen, it can kind of be overwhelming at first. But this game is a lot more simple than it looks. To describe Medal of Chaos's gameplay, it could be pretty much summed up as an arcadey mech game. It's not trying to be a mech simulator like the MechWarrior games, or hell, even the Armored Core games. This is coming from someone who's only played a handful of those games, so cut me some slack here. You have a health bar and these little green lights that indicate how many more health bars you have. The health bar raises over time if you haven't gotten hurt in a while, but if you lose all of your health in one bar, then one of the green lights goes out and you have another health bar. The game calls these fuselages, and when you're running low, Jodie will let you know.
Mr. President, the fuselage damage rate is over 70%. Mr. President, you're too nervous. You've lost the spring in your step.
There's also an energy bar right next to your health. This indicates how much energy is being used for the handful of weapons that use it, and the main thing that you're going to be using, dashing. Your walking speed isn't that quick, unfortunately, so the dash is a necessity. Unfortunately, since you have a limited amount of energy, you can't just dash on a whim. You have to wait until the energy bar rises up. If you dash for too long, then it starts eating into your health bar as well, so you're going to have to pay at least a little bit of attention for how much of your energy and health is being used before you go into combat. But when used responsibly, the dash can be very helpful and can make you fly for a short period of time thanks to your jump. There's also a map on the top left-hand corner, and although it's helpful, it doesn't show everything that you're going to be needing to do in the mission. Luckily, if you pause the game, then you see the full map of the level, so if I couldn't find the next thing to blow up, then I would look at the map. But that's all the non-combat parts out of the way. Where are the guns? Well, in Metal Wolf, there's over 100 different types of weapons with 9 different categories. Handguns, shotguns, machine guns, assault rifles, sniper rifles, bazookas, grenade launchers, missile launchers, railguns, and flamethrowers. There's a lot of different weapons and weapon combinations you could have here, but eventually you'll find the right combination that fits with what you want. You could hold up to 8 weapons at a time in each mission, with 2 of the weapons being equipped on your mech's left and right hands. Some of these weapons take 2 weapon slots, meaning that they need both your left and right hands for it to work. These only apply to the railguns and sniper rifles, so you have to be careful on what weapons you're going to be planning to use in each mission. You fire with the trigger buttons, and each gun has a limited amount of ammo, but you can find ammo pickups on the ground if you're lucky to find the right ammo. For the most part, I stuck with a bazooka and a machine gun of some sort, and I got better weapons over time by investing in them. This game's way of upgrading things is getting money by completing levels and investing into a category of weapons, then using more money and rare material to make the weapons in the category you upgraded. You get rare material from beating large enemies or bases, which they're in almost every single level, so it's not as rare as it sounds, but this is how you get better stuff. You don't invest money into your mech though for upgrading it, which is kinda weird. Your upgrades for your mech are in the form of saving hostages in each level. They can either drop health, offensive, or defensive upgrades, which I didn't really go after all the hostages in the game because the map doesn't tell you where to find these guys, and sometimes the box that they're trapped in has a timer, and if you don't save them in time, then it fucking explodes. You also can't use any explosive weapons on them, or else... But you can shoot the box to help them escape, so you're just shooting your machine gun at a box with holes in them, and hey, they're completely fine. Alright, that makes sense. The hostages also drop music tracks by saving musicians, and Jody describes their torment being held captive.
A musician was among the POWs you rescued. He was surely forced to play the ukulele on the beach.
Going back to the weapons, you can change them on the fly during a mission by hitting the circle button, and then changing the weapons you want to use with the trigger buttons, which may have not been the best decision on the developer's part, because when things get super hectic and you run out of ammo on your weapon, then you have to switch your weapons, which leaves you exposed for getting shot. Luckily, the game doesn't stop you from having copies of the same weapons equipped, and each weapon has its own ammo, meaning that you could have 2 of the same guns, and once you run out of ammo on one gun, you can switch to the same gun with full ammo. That's really cool and very helpful once I figured that out. Another useful thing this game has is the instant burst mode. You have this little blue bar, and once you fill it up by either destroying enemies or finding fuel for this, once you press the L and R3 buttons at the same time, all of your weapons fire off, killing everything in sight. But there is one thing I can kinda give this game shit for, in that this game doesn't have a tutorial, or at least something that directly tells you what things do. Maybe they're hoping that you have the game's manual on standby, but the remaster doesn't come with any manual that I could find, at least the digital copy that I own, so that doesn't help. But once you figure out what's going on with the controls and what's going on with the HUD, it's pretty simple to understand. Which I can kinda say the same thing for the game's levels, to an extent. Most of the game's levels are either blow up a bunch of bases in a timely manner, or it's centered around a boss battle that has its own gimmick. This is really cool at first when you're going across the country liberating everything, but then you kind of realize that this game gets a little monotonous. Yeah, you're basically doing a lot of the same thing over and over again, blowing up soldiers, vehicles, and giant tanks. But then you have the target areas that are usually these bases that you have to blow up. After that, you take care of the boss of the level, and for the most part, I like the game's bosses. For the most part. The San Francisco level is a great introduction to this format. It introduces us to the target areas, exploration being rewarded by finding hostages or finding health and ammo items, and having a little boss battle that's pretty decent. This level also introduced me to something that this game kind of penalizes you for: preparation. I decided to replace my starter bazooka with this grenade launcher that I unlocked after beating the first level, and I can safely say that was really stupid on my part. It took forever to destroy these towers, and when I brute forced my way to the boss battle, I didn't stand a chance. So I re-equipped my bazooka, and things were good there. Going back to the rest of the levels, they were pretty cool, if samey at points. The Alcatraz level is just one giant timer. If you don't blow up all these towers in time, then this giant cannon will destroy San Francisco. You have the Grand Canyon level, and this has only one of the few mid-level bosses in the game. And it's not that hard. All you need to do is just blow up this helicopter. And the pilot really likes the vice president.
Sir Richard, I'm sorry.
I wonder what anyone sees in the vice president.
Later levels like Phoenix place you fighting 3 mechs alongside destroying some towers that are blocking your map. This level wasn't that difficult on my first try, and was one of the levels I went back to a lot when grinding, which I'll explain why later. Then you have Miami when you're blowing up a boat on the beach. Then there's Chicago, home of the bear, and Michigan Report from Hell, where you're blowing up more towers to stop a poison gas leak. Basically another timer level, but just on a much bigger scale. After that, there's this giant spider boss battle in New York City.
What do you think of my cute little pet? Thanks to him, the people of New York City are right now festively running around and trying to escape.
And even though this thing can kill you in one shot, after taking down these towers, it can be pretty easy. I can't say the same thing for the Statue of Liberty level. This level is one big boss battle with a giant tank that moves slowly at first, but once you knock some of its health out of the way, then it moves much faster. On top of that, you have this timer in the form of a health bar of your colleagues, including Jody, and if you don't save them in time, you have to do the boss battle all over again. And on top of that, you have another health bar timer that appears when you take half of the boss's health away once the resistance comes in and helps you out by giving you a little bit more leeway. And if you still don't kill this thing in time, and if your colleagues are still alive, the bridge has a dead end, and you'll fall to your death if you don't do this in time. So after figuring out what to do with all the timers, my strategy was pretty simple. Blow it the fuck up! Upgrading and getting the most powerful bazookas and missile launchers I can get, and blow it up as fast as humanly possible. After a lot of grinding, which isn't surprising, this is a FromSoft game, I killed this fucking thing. After that, you have the second White House level where you have to go back and destroy this outer shell that's full of guns and stuff. This version of the place is called the Fight House. Get it?
Boo! You stink!
This boss battle is simple, but if you do too much damage to the White House itself, then you have to do it all over again. And it's very easy to let this happen, so just be careful where you shoot at. After that, it's the Vegas level, where you have to fight the VP, which is relatively simple, but then there's the real final boss level, where you have to fight the Vice President in this giant tank thing in space. It looks intimidating at first, but saving the burst mode until you really need it definitely saved me here. This game doesn't have any boss battles where I need to take a fucking college course on how to study their movements to survive. I'll stop with the Dark Souls references now. Moving on to the game's presentation, graphically, this game looks pretty good. The Xbox was definitely more powerful than the PS2, just by looking at the specs alone, so you can get away with having large areas with a bunch of soldiers that are ready to be destroyed. I know the remaster I'm playing does do some upgrades to some of the textures and obviously enables widescreen, but I never noticed that this game was stretched out or looked wrong for being in a new aspect ratio. That's the reason I keep older games in their original aspect ratio for my videos. These games weren't designed for a 16:9 aspect ratio, so you might get things that you weren't supposed to see on screen. But in Metal Wolf Chaos, I didn't notice any oddities for making the game into widescreen, which is really nice. The music in the game can jump from this awesome pseudo-orchestral songs that sound like something straight out of an action movie, to songs that just don't really belong anywhere. But there is this one track that really stood out to me for some reason. It plays right after you beat a level and you get this message from the journalist that follows you. God damn, that guitar goes really fucking hard. There were a couple levels I didn't mention because I wanted to give you what I thought was the highlights of this game if you're interested in checking it out. Even though this game goes for about $25 and it's about 4 hours long, I would recommend checking it out. But if you're cautious about the price, then I would wait for it to be on sale like I did. It is monotonous at points when destroying the same towers throughout each level, but every level has some gimmick or boss battle that makes them stand out from one another. The story being this cheesy action movie with a ridiculous premise that makes it sound something out of a trauma movie from the 80s, the voice acting is absolutely hilarious if you're into really bad voice acting and bad translations, and graphically this game looks pretty decent and has a pretty solid soundtrack. When you have the chance, check out Metal Wolf Chaos, it's a lot of fun.
You know, this was kind of a weird pick for me to play something like this, especially since in my last video I said I was going to play something spooky, but things don't always work out, and there's a bit of a reason for that. I'm moving. This will actually be the last video that's recorded in this room, which I'm very excited for the new place. I'm getting it all like set up and everything, so it's gonna look more like, you know, like a proper YouTuber's studio or whatever the fuck you wanna call it. But yeah, no, this will be the last video that's shot here, and I promise that my next video will be something kind of spooky. But going back to Metal Wolf Chaos, I did find it to be an enjoyable ride, even with some of its shortcomings. The voice acting certainly helped out a lot.
Have a nice day, or not, Michael.
What did you guys think about this game? If you have any thoughts about it, please put it in the comments below and give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I cover a wide variety of games, from licensed kids games to shitty horror games, so you never know what kind of videos I'm going to make next, which is, I guess, kinda cool. Thank you guys for watching, stay safe, and have a good night.